The air was thick with the scent of jasmine and grilled steak as I stepped onto the manicured lawn of the Whitaker estate, my heart pounding like a drum in my chest. I'm Lena Whitaker, 32, and tonight I was walking into the Lion's Den, my family's annual reunion held at my parents' sprawling mansion in the Hamptons. The invitation had arrived 3 weeks ago, embossed in gold, promising an evening of celebration and connection. But for me, it was a summons to judgment. My family, parents, siblings, aunts, uncles, cousins, had spent years dismissing me as the poor relation, the one who'd thrown away a gilded future for a dream they deemed worthless. They didn't know I'd built an empire in the shadows, and tonight, I'd face their scorn in the very place I'd once called home. Before I dive into this story, let me ask, have you ever had to prove yourself to those who should have believed in you from the start? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and if you've ever felt underestimated, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of triumph. Now, let's get into it. Growing up as a Whitaker meant living under a spotlight of expectation. Our family wasn't just wealthy, we were a dynasty. My father, Charles Whitaker, was a real estate magnate whose developments shaped skylines from New York to Dubai. My mother, Evelyn, was a former debutante turned philanthropist, her name synonymous with charity galas and social influence. Their Hamptons estate, a 12-bedroom Georgian masterpiece, was a stage for their legacy, hosting events where senators mingled with CEOs. My older brother, James, was groomed to inherit the family business, his Harvard MBA framed like a trophy in Dad's office. My younger sister, Claire, was the golden child, a Yale-educated lawyer whose courtroom victories were family folklore. Then there was me, the middle child, the odd one out. While James analyzed spreadsheets and Claire debated ethics, I was drawn to the hum of computers, the logic of code, the thrill of creating something from nothing. At 10, I taught myself BASIC on an old PC in the attic. By 14, I was building apps for my friends, crude games, mostly, but they worked. My parents didn't notice. Lena's tinkering again, Mom would say, her smile tight, as if my passion was a phase to outgrow. Dad was blunter. Tech is for hired help, he'd declare. Whitakers build empires, not apps. The kitchen was my refuge, not for cooking, but for late-night coding sessions with Maria, our housekeeper, who'd sneak me coffee and ask about my projects. "You've got a gift, Mija," she'd say, her eyes warm. "Don't let them dim it." Her belief kept me going, but it couldn't shield me from family dinners where my siblings' achievements were toasted and my interests were ignored. "Lena will find her path," Mom would say to guests, her tone implying I was lost. By high school, I was the family disappointment, my passion dismissed as a hobby unfit for our legacy. To appease my parents, I enrolled at Princeton, their alma mater, studying economics to learn something practical. But I minored in computer science, sneaking into coding labs after hours. I started a secret project, a platform to connect freelancers with small businesses, inspired by Maria's stories of her cousins struggling to find work. I called it ConnectSphere, a side hustle I coded in my dorm, launching in my sophomore year. It was small at first, a few hundred users, but it grew steadily, earning enough to cover my textbooks. My double life continued until senior year, when a tech accelerator in Silicon Valley noticed ConnectSphere. They offered mentorship and funding, but it meant moving to California and focusing on the startup full-time. I stood in my parents' study, heart racing, and told them I wanted to skip grad school to pursue my company. The silence was suffocating. "This is madness," Dad finally said, his voice cold. "You're throwing away a Whitaker education for some internet scheme?" Mom's eyes were wet, but her words cut deeper. "If you choose this, you're on your own, Lena. We won't bankroll failure." James, home from a business trip, laughed. "You think you're Zuckerberg? Good luck surviving on ramen." Claire, already at Yale Law, shook her head. "It's not too late to apply for an MBA, Lena. Don't embarrass us." I left that night with a suitcase and $8,000 in savings, my family's rejection burning in my chest. They cut me off. No trust fund, no calls, no holiday invites. The Hamptons mansion became a memory, its gates closed to me. The next 5 years were a crucible. I moved to a cramped San Francisco apartment, sharing a bathroom with two strangers. ConnectSphere consumed me. 18-hour days coding, pitching to investors, and learning business the hard way. Rejections piled up. One VC called my platform cute but niche. But I persisted, fueled by Maria's encouragement and my own stubbornness. A breakthrough came in year 2 when a mid-sized retailer adopted ConnectSphere, boosting our user base to 50,000. By year 3, we had 1 million users, and I secured $5 million in funding. 2 years ago, ConnectSphere went public. I was 30, and my company was valued at $2 billion. I became CEO, my face on Forbes' 30 Under 30 cover, but I kept my success quiet from my family. They thought I was scraping by, maybe waitressing to fund my hobby. I wanted it that way. Their approval had once been my North Star, but now I crave recognition on my terms, not theirs. When the reunion invitation arrived, I hesitated. Why return to a place that had rejected me? But something, curiosity, closure, maybe defiance, made me RSVP. Now, standing on the lawn, I adjusted my navy blazer, chosen for its understated elegance. My outfit was theory, not Chanel, a deliberate nod to my roots without screaming wealth. My dark hair was pulled into a low bun, practical but polished. The reunion was in full swing, fairy lights strung across the garden, a jazz quartet playing softly. Waiters in crisp white shirts wove through the crowd, offering champagne. I recognized faces, cousins, aunts, family friends, all part of the Whitaker orbit, their laughter tinged with privilege. My mother spotted me first, her silver dress catching the light. Lena, she called, her smile practiced. She air-kissed my cheeks, her perfume sharp. You made it. We weren't sure you'd come. Her eyes scanned me, calculating, as they always had. You look, well, she said, meaning I wasn't the waifish ideal she prized. Dad approached, his gray hair immaculate, his handshake firm but brief. Good to see you, Lena. It's been a while. His tone was neutral, as if I'd been on a weekend trip, not exiled for 5 years. James and Claire were next, a power duo in tailored suits. James, now 35, was Dad's right hand, his smirk unchanged. Still chasing that tech dream, Lena? He asked, sipping bourbon. Claire, 29, gave a tight smile. It's brave, doing your own thing. Not everyone can handle the family business. Their words were polite, but the subtext was clear. I was the failure, the one who'd chosen wrong. The crowd shifted, and I saw Aunt Vivian, Mom's sister, whispering to a cousin. Lena's back, she said, loud enough for me to hear. Wonder how she afforded the flight. Laughter followed, sharp and familiar. My chest tightened, but I forced a smile. This was the Whitaker way. Status was currency, and I was bankrupt in their eyes. They didn't know I could buy this mansion twice over. Dinner was announced, and we moved to a long table under a white tent, set with crystal and silver. I took a seat near the end, beside Cousin Emily, who at least wasn't openly hostile. The first course arrived, lobster bisque, rich and velvety. Mom raised her glass. To family, she said, and to Whitaker legacy. Glasses clinked, but her eyes skipped over me. The bisque was perfect, but it tasted like ash in my mouth. I was here, but I wasn't one of them. James stood to speak, his voice carrying. This year's been monumental for Whitaker Enterprises. We closed a $500 million deal in Dubai, and I'm proud to lead our expansion. Applause erupted. Claire followed, her tone crisp. I won a landmark case for the firm, setting a precedent in corporate law. More cheers. Then silence. All eyes turned to me, expectant, mocking. Lena, Mom said, her voice sweet but edged. Why don't you share what you've been up to? The table leaned in, ready to judge. I took a sip of water, my mind racing. Should I tell them now? Spill the truth and watch their faces change? No, not yet. I wanted to see how deep their scorn ran. I've been working in tech, I said simply. Building something I'm passionate about. James snorted. Still playing with computers? Hope it's paying the bills. Claire chimed in. Tech's tough, Lena. Not everyone makes it. You got grit, though. Her compliment was a knife, sharp and patronizing. Aunt Vivian leaned forward. The jazz quartet shifted to a slower tune, its notes weaving through the warm Hamptons night as the reunion dinner moved into its third course. A rack of lamb with rosemary juice, plated with such precision it could have graced a Michelin-starred restaurant. I, Lena Whitaker, sat at the edge of the long table, my navy blazer feeling tighter with every passing minute. The fairy lights above cast a soft glow, but the atmosphere at the Whitaker family reunion was anything but warm. My family's voices, sharp, smug, or subtly pitying, filled the tent, each word a reminder of the role they'd assigned me. The failure, the outcast, the one who dared to defy the Whitaker legacy. I took a sip of Pinot Noir, its velvet notes grounding me. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Another message from Priya, my COO, board's asking about the Singapore expansion. Call when you're free. I silenced it, but the reminder of my real life, ConnectSphere, a $2 billion tech empire I'd built from nothing, sharpened my focus. Here, I was just Lena, the poor relation they mocked. But I wasn't here to wallow. I was here to see how far they'd go, to let their assumptions pile up before I turned the tables. The lamb was exquisite, but my family barely noticed. James, my older brother, was holding court, recounting a golf game with a senator. He's backing our Miami project, he said, his bourbon glass glinting. Whitaker Enterprises is unstoppable. My father, Charles, nodded, his pride palpable. Claire, my younger sister, chimed in, her voice crisp. My firm's handling the legal side. We're rewriting zoning laws for the deal. The table erupted in murmurs of approval, the Whitaker dynasty basking in its own glow. Then Aunt Vivian, her diamond earrings flashing, turned to me. Lena, you've been so quiet. Surely you have something to share? Her smile was a trap, her tone dripping with condescension. All eyes swiveled to me, forks pausing midair. I set down my glass, meeting her gaze. I've been busy with my platform, I said evenly. It's growing, keeping me on my toes. Platform, James echoed, smirking. What, like a blog? Or one of those crowdfunding things? Laughter rippled, sharp and cutting. My cousin Mark, a hedge fund manager, leaned in. No offense, Lena, but tech's a gamble. Most startups crash and burn. You got a backup plan? His concern was as fake as his tan. I'm managing, I replied, my voice steady despite the heat rising in my chest. Managing was an understatement. ConnectSphere had 10 million users, offices in San Francisco, London, and Tokyo, an evaluation that made Whitaker Enterprises look like a corner store. But I held my tongue, letting their ignorance fuel my resolve. Mom, ever the diplomat, tried to smooth things over. It's admirable, Lena, pursuing your interests. But stability matters. Have you considered consulting? It's a solid path. Her words were a velvet glove over a steel fist, implying I was floundering. Dad grunted. Tech's volatile. You should have stayed in economics, Lena. Built something real. Real like skyscrapers? I asked, a slight edge to my tone. Or real like connecting millions of people to opportunities? The table went quiet, my defiance unexpected. Claire raised an eyebrow. Million? That's ambitious. What's your user base? A few thousand. Her lawyer's precision cut deep, daring me to oversell. Let's just say it's more than you'd expect, I said, smiling faintly. I could have dropped the Forbes cover right then, watched their jaws hit the floor, but timing was everything. I wanted them to dig their hole deeper, to reveal the full extent of their disdain before I flipped the script. Uncle Richard, Dad's brother, broke the tension with a chuckle. Well, it's nice you're keeping busy, Lena. Not everyone needs to run an empire. His patronizing tone was a family trademark, dismissing me as a hobbyist. The conversation shifted to Claire's latest case, and I faded into the background, my lamb growing cold. Emily, my cousin beside me, whispered, "They're harsh, but they mean well." I doubted that, but I gave her a small nod. The fourth course arrived, wild mushroom risotto, its earthy aroma filling the air. I noticed the waitstaff, moving with practiced grace, their eyes occasionally meeting mine. One server, a young man named Tomas, had been with the catering company I'd recommended to Mom for this event. ConnectSphere had partnered with their firm for freelance gigs, and Tomas knew who I was. He gave me a subtle nod, a flicker of respect that felt like a lifeline in this sea of judgment. As plates were cleared, Mom stood to make a toast. To the Whitaker legacy, she said, her voice ringing with pride. To James, leading our business to new heights. To Claire, redefining justice. And to all of you, upholding our name. Her eyes skipped me, a silent exclusion that stung more than I expected. Glasses clinked, and I raised my smile mask. The legacy they celebrated was one I'd been exiled from, but I'd built my own, one they couldn't imagine. The dinner paused for a break, and guests mingled on the lawn, the jazz quartet now playing an upbeat swing. I slipped away to the garden's edge, needing air. The mansion loomed behind me, its windows glowing like judgmental eyes. Memories flooded back, coding in the attic, hiding from Mom's lectures about proper careers. I'd left this place to escape their expectations, and now I was back, not to beg for acceptance, but to reclaim my narrative. My phone buzzed again. Priya, Singapore team needs your sign-off on the partnership. Also, Fords want a follow-up interview. I typed a quick reply, promising to call later. ConnectSphere was my sanctuary, a world where I was valued for my work, not my last name. But tonight, I was playing a different game, one where patience was my weapon. James approached, bourbon in hand, his tie slightly loosened. Lena, you holding up? This crowd can be brutal. His tone was almost kind, but his smirk betrayed him. I'm fine, I said, just taking all in. He chuckled. Look, tech's a tough gig. If you ever need a lifeline, I can get you a job at the firm. Entry level, but it's a start. Entry level. The words burned. I was running a company that employed 2,000 people, yet he saw me as a charity case. Thanks, James, I said, my voice cool. But I'm good. He shrugged, as if my refusal was proof of my folly, and rejoined the crowd. I watched him go, my resolve hardening. They thought they knew me, but they were about to learn how wrong they were. Back at the table, dessert was served, a deconstructed cheesecake with berry coulis, its presentation as elegant as the dinner's earlier courses. Claire leaned over, her voice low. Lena, I hope you're not upset. We just worry about you. Tech's not exactly secure. Her concern was a performance, her eyes searching for weakness. I appreciate the concern, I said, cutting into the cheesecake. But I've got things under control. She frowned, sensing my confidence but unsure how to challenge it. Dad overheard, his brow furrowing. Control's one thing, Lena. Results are another. You're not still chasing that app, are you? What's it called? Connect something? ConnectSphere, I said, meeting his gaze. And yes, I'm still chasing it. It's doing better than you'd think. He grunted, unconvinced. Aunt Vivian, eavesdropping, piped up. ConnectSphere? I think I read about that. Some startup, right? Didn't it fizzle out? Her ignorance was almost comical, but it stung all the same. No, it's still around, I said, my smile tight. Bigger than ever. She waved a hand dismissively. Well, good for you, dear. But you should think about a real career. Maybe James can help. The table nodded, their consensus clear. I was a lost cause, clinging to a pipe dream. Tomas approached with a coffee tray, his eyes meeting mine again. Miss Whitaker, he murmured, so low only I heard. Everything okay? I nodded subtly, grateful for his discretion. He knew I was more than the family's punching bag, and that knowledge steadied me. The coffee was rich, its bitterness a perfect match for the evening's mood. As the night wore on, the family's jabs grew bolder. Cousin Mark asked if I was still renting that dive in San Francisco, implying I was one missed rent check from homelessness. Uncle Richard wondered aloud if I'd tried waitressing to make ends meet. Each comment was a brick in the wall they'd built around me, but I didn't crumble. I listened, I smiled, I let them think they had me figured out. Every insult was fuel, every smirk a step closer to the moment I've been waiting for. The reunion wasn't over, but the stage was set. My family had shown their hand, their disdain laid bare. They thought they were untouchable, their legacy unassailable. But I wasn't the Lena they remembered, and soon they'd see the truth. I glanced at Tomas, who was clearing plates, his nod a silent promise of loyalty. The night was building to something bigger, and I was ready to take control. The Hamptons night had grown cooler, the jasmine-scented breeze, now carrying a faint chill as the Whitaker family reunion pressed on under the white tent. The fairy lights flickered above, casting shadows that danced across the crystal-laden table. But the warmth of the setting did nothing to soften the icy edge of my family's words. I, Lena Whitaker, 32, sat with my coffee cup cradled in my hands, its bitterness a mirror to the mood. My navy blazer felt like armor, shielding me from the barrage of condescension that had defined this evening. My family, parents, siblings, aunts, uncles, cousins, had spent hours painting me as the poor relation, the Whitaker who'd squandered her potential. They didn't know I was the CEO of ConnectSphere, a $2 billion tech empire, and I was letting their scorn pile up, biding my time for the moment that would flip their world upside down. The dessert plates, remnants of the deconstructed cheesecake, had been cleared, and the jazz quartet transitioned to a mournful ballad, its notes underscoring the tension. My phone buzzed again, a third message from Priya. My COO, Singapore deals moving fast. Need your input on equity split by morning. I glanced at it, then slipped the phone back into my pocket. ConnectSphere was my reality, a world where I commanded boardrooms and shaped industries. Here, I was a punching bag, but not for much longer. Every jab, every smirk was pushing me closer to the edge, and I could feel the moment of reckoning drawing near. Mom stood to introduce the next part of the evening, a family showcase, where each Whitaker would share a recent triumph. We're here to celebrate our legacy, she said, her silver dress shimmering. Let's honor those who've elevated our name. Her eyes swept the table, lingering on James and Claire, but passing over me like I was invisible. The showcase was a tradition, a stage for the family to flaunt their status, and I knew what was coming. More praise for my siblings, more pity for me. James went first, striding to a makeshift podium with the confidence of a man born to rule. Whitaker Enterprises is thriving, he declared, his voice booming. Our Dubai project secured $500 million, and I'm leading a new venture in Singapore, $1 billion in projected revenue. The crowd erupted in applause, Dad's nod of approval as loud as any cheer. Claire followed, her posture perfect. I want a federal case that's reshaping corporate tax law, she said. It's a landmark for our firm and a win for justice. More claps, Mom's smile radiant. Then came the cousins. Mark's hedge fund hitting a $2 billion valuation. Emily's art gallery opening in Soho. Aunt Vivian's charity auction raising $3 million. Each story was a brick in the Whitaker monument, their successes stacking higher. I sat silently, my coffee cooling, knowing my turn was inevitable. The table's eyes began to drift toward me, some curious, others mocking. Aunt Vivian, her voice syrupy, called out, "Lena, surely you have something to contribute? Don't be shy." The air thickened, every gaze a spotlight. I set down my cup, my heart steady despite the pressure. I've been working on ConnectSphere, I said, keeping my tone neutral. It's a platform that's making a difference, connecting freelancers with businesses worldwide. The words were simple, but they carried weight. 10 million users, $2 billion in valuation, a Forbes cover. But I held back, letting them fill in the blanks with their assumptions. James laughed a sharp bark. ConnectSphere? That's still a thing? I thought it was some college project. Claire leaned forward, her lawyer's instincts kicking in. What's your revenue stream? Advertising? Subscriptions? Most platforms bleed money. Her question was a probe, testing for weakness. Dad frowned. Lena, be honest. Is this thing even profitable, or are you still burning through savings? The table murmured, their pity palpable. Cousin Mark chimed in. Tech's a graveyard for dreamers. You gotta know when to cut your losses, Lena. Aunt Vivian's smile was patronizing. It's sweet you're trying, dear, but maybe it's time for a real job. I know a firm looking for assistance. Laughter rippled, each chuckle a dagger. My hands clenched under the table, but I kept my face calm, my smile a shield. I'm doing fine, I said, my voice steady. ConnectSphere's growing faster than I expected. The truth was an understatement. 200% year-over-year growth, partnerships with Fortune 500 companies, a pending expansion into Asia. but I wanted them to underestimate me, to dig their hole deeper. Their dismissal was my leverage, and I was collecting every slight for the reckoning. Mom tried to pivot, her diplomacy faltering. Well, Lena's always been creative. Let's move on. But Uncle Richard wasn't done. Creative's one thing, he said, his tone heavy with judgment. But Whitakers build legacies, not pipe dreams. Lena, you're 32. When are you going to grow up? The table nodded, their consensus a wall closing in. My chest tightened, the old wounds of rejection flaring, but I didn't break. I'd faced worse. VCs who laughed me out of rooms, competitors who tried to sabotage me. This was just another challenge, and I was ready. The showcase ended, and the crowd dispersed for cocktails on the lawn. I stayed seated, needing a moment to breathe. Tomas, the waiter who knew my real identity, approached with a fresh coffee. "You okay, Miss Whitaker?" He whispered, his eyes kind. "They're tough, but you're tougher." I gave him a small smile, grateful for the anchor. "Thanks, Tomas. Just waiting for the right moment." He nodded, slipping back into the crowd. I glanced at the mansion, its grandeur a reminder of the life I'd left. 5 years ago, I'd walked away with nothing, determined to prove I didn't need their money or their name. ConnectSphere was my proof, a legacy forged in code and grit. But tonight, I wasn't just proving it to myself. I was here to make them see. Claire approached, her heels clicking on the grass. "Lena, can we talk?" she asked, her tone softer but still guarded. I braced myself, expecting another lecture. "Sure," I said, gesturing to the seat beside me. She sat, her hands folded. "I didn't mean to pile on earlier," she said. "But we're worried. Tech's a black hole. You're smart. Why not pivot to something stable like consulting? I can make calls." Her offer was a lifeline wrapped in judgment, assuming I was drowning. "I appreciate it," I said, "but I'm not looking to pivot. ConnectSphere's my path, and it's working." She frowned, unconvinced. "Working how?" "You're vague, Lena. If you're in trouble, we can help." Her concern was a lawyer's tactic, probing for cracks. "I'm not in trouble," I said, meeting her gaze. "You'll see soon enough." My confidence unsettled her, but she didn't press. Instead, she stood, smoothing her dress. "Just don't let pride get in the way of family. We're here if you need us." Her words were hollow, a reminder that family had meant rejection when I needed them most. As she walked away, James and Dad approached, their faces a study in contrast. James's smirk versus Dad's stern frown. "Lena," Dad said, his voice low, "this tech nonsense has gone on long enough. You're embarrassing yourself. Come back to New York. I'll get you a role at the firm. Analyst, maybe. It's not too late to salvage your future." Salvage? As if my life was a wreck. I was running a company that employed thousands, yet he saw me as a lost cause. "I have a future, Dad," I said, my voice firm. "It's just not the one you planned." James scoffed. "What coding a basement? Wake up, Lena. You're not cut out for this." His arrogance was breathtaking, but it only steeled my resolve. "I'm exactly where I need to be," I said, standing to face them. "And I'm not here to ask for your approval." Dad's eyes narrowed, but before he could respond, Mom called everyone back to the tent for the evening's final event, a charity auction to benefit her foundation. The shift in focus was a relief, but I knew the spotlight would return to me soon. The auction began, with Mom auctioning off luxury items, a yacht weekend, a Paris villa stay, a diamond necklace. The bids climbed, each one a flex of Whitaker wealth. I watched, detached, as James bid $50,000 on a vintage car, Claire $30,000 on a spa retreat. Then came a tech package, a private dinner with a Silicon Valley innovator, and a tour of a top startup's headquarters. Mom described it vaguely, likely unaware of its significance. "Shall we start at $10,000? She asked. Hands stayed down, the crowd uninterested. Tech wasn't their world. I raised my hand. $15,000, I said, my voice clear. The tent went quiet, all eyes on me. James laughed. "Lena, you sure about that? Don't overstretch." Claire whispered to Mom, her brow furrowed. Dad's frown deepened. "Where you playing at?" he muttered. $20,000, I countered, ignoring them. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Aunt Vivian leaned forward. Lena, darling, don't be reckless. You can't afford this. Her pity was infuriating, but I smiled. I know what I can afford, I said. The auctioneer, sensing drama, pushed on. $25,000 for Miss Whitaker. Any other bids? Silence. The gavel fell. Sold to Lena Whitaker. The crowd whispered, their confusion palpable. How could the poor Whitaker afford $25,000? Tomas, clearing a nearby table, gave me a discreet thumbs up, his grin a spark in the darkness. My bid wasn't just a flex. It was a signal, a crack in the facade I'd maintained all night. The family's assumptions were starting to wobble, and I could feel the tide turning. Mom, flustered, moved to the next item, but the mood had shifted. James leaned over, his voice low. Where'd you get that kind of money, Lena? Borrowing from friends. Claire's eyes narrowed. Or are you in debt? Be honest. Their questions were a last-ditch effort to keep me in their box, but I was done playing small. I earned it, I said simply. You'll understand soon. My cryptic response unnerved them, and for the first time, I saw doubt in their eyes. The auction ended, and the crowd mingled, but the family's focus stayed on me, their whispers growing louder. They thought they knew me, but they were about to learn the truth. The night was reaching its peak, and I was ready to take the stage. The Hamptons night was electric with anticipation, the fairy lights under the white tent casting a surreal glow over the Whitaker family reunion. The charity auction had just ended, my $25,000 bid for a tech package still rippling through the crowd like a shockwave. I, Lena Whitaker, 32, stood at the edge of the lawn, my navy blazer a quiet contrast to the glittering dresses and tailored suits around me. My family's whispers, once smug, now uneasy, followed me like shadows. They'd spent the evening mocking me as the poor relation, the Whitaker who'd thrown away her legacy for a tech pipe dream. They didn't know I was the CEO of ConnectSphere, a $2 billion empire that dwarfed their achievements. But the moment I've been waiting for was here, and I was ready to rewrite their story of me. The jazz quartet paused, and Mom took the podium to close the evening. Thank you all for making this reunion a celebration of our legacy, she said, her voice polished but strained. Her eyes darted to me, a flicker of uncertainty breaking her composure. My bid had unsettled her, a crack in the narrative that I was a failure. Before we end, she continued, we have one final announcement. A special guest has joined us to honor our family's contributions. She gestured to the tent's entrance, and a man stepped forward, David Chun, a venture capitalist I recognized instantly. He was a ConnectSphere investor, one of the first to back me 5 years ago. My stomach tightened. I hadn't invited him, but I knew why he was here. ConnectSphere had partnered with Mom's Foundation for a freelance training program, and David was the liaison. He didn't know my family was unaware of my success, and his presence was a wild card I hadn't planned for. David, in a sharp gray suit, smiled at the crowd. It's an honor to be here, he said, his voice warm but authoritative. The Whitaker family's philanthropy is renowned, and I'm thrilled to announce a new collaboration with the Whitaker Foundation, made possible by one of your own. The crowd murmured, curious. Mom beamed, assuming he meant James or Claire. I caught Tomas, the waiter who knew my identity, watching from the sidelines, his eyes wide with anticipation. Lena Whitaker, David said, turning to me, has built ConnectSphere into a global force, empowering millions through technology. Her vision has transformed lives, and we're proud to partner with her company to train underserved freelancers. The tent fell silent, a collective intake of breath. Every eye turned to me, faces frozen in shock, confusion, or disbelief. James's bourbon glass stopped halfway to his lips. Claire's jaw tightened. Mom's hand clutched her pearls, her smile vanishing. Dad's frown deepened, his mind racing to process the impossible. I stood, my heart pounding, but my voice steady. Thank you, David, I said, stepping toward the podium. I'm honored to be part of this partnership. The crowd was still, the weight of David's words sinking in. I turned to my family, their expressions a kaleidoscope of emotions. James's smirk gone, Claire's eyes narrowing, Mom's face paling. I suppose now's a good time to clarify. I continued, my tone calm but firm. ConnectSphere isn't a hobby or a college project. It's a company I founded, grew to 10 million users, and took public 2 years ago. I'm its CEO, and it's valued at $2 billion. The silence was deafening, broken only by a faint clink as Aunt Vivian dropped her spoon. I let the moment linger, savoring the shift. Forbes called me a tech titan last year. I added, meeting Dad's gaze. The New York Times ran a feature on our Singapore expansion. And that tech package I bid on? The Silicon Valley innovator is me. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Family friends whispering frantically. Tomas, clearing a table, gave me a discreet nod, his grin a silent cheer. James was the first to recover, his voice sharp. That's impossible. You're what, a coder? How could you run a company like that? Claire cut in, her lawyer's instincts kicking in. A $2 billion valuation? Lena, be serious. What's the real story? Their denial was almost comical, but it stung, a reminder of how little they believed in me. The real story, I said, is that I left this family 5 years ago with $8,000 and a dream. I worked 18-hour days, lived in a shoebox, and pitched to VCs who laughed me out of rooms. But I built ConnectSphere from nothing, and it's bigger than Whitaker Enterprises ever will be. I turned to Dad. You said tech was for hired help. Turns out, it's for visionaries. Mom's hand trembled, her voice barely a whisper. Lena, why didn't you tell us? Her question was a plea, but it carried the weight of years of dismissal. Would you have listened? I asked. When I told you I wanted to start a company, you cut me off. Called it a phase. I didn't need your approval then, and I don't need it now. Dad cleared his throat, his face a mask of calculation. This is impressive, Lena, but running a company that size, there must be challenges. We could help offer guidance. His pivot was transparent, a bid to reclaim control. James nodded, sensing an angle. Yeah, Whitaker Enterprises has connections. We could open doors for you. I laughed, the sound sharp in the quiet tent. Open doors? I've opened my own. ConnectSphere partners with Google, Microsoft, and the UN. I don't need your Rolodex. The crowd murmured, family friends now eyeing me with awe instead of pity. Claire's face hardened, her voice low. So you let us sit here, criticizing you, knowing you were this? That's manipulative. Manipulative. I countered, stepping closer. You spent the night calling me a failure, questioning my finances, suggesting I waitress to survive. I want to see how you treat me if you thought I was struggling. And you showed me exactly who you are. My words landed like a slap, and for the first time, I saw shame flicker in her eyes. Aunt Vivian, ever the socialite, tried to defuse the tension. Lena, darling, this is extraordinary. We're so proud. Her flattery was hollow, a scramble to align with my success. I ignored her, focusing on Mom, whose eyes were wet. We didn't know, she said. We thought you were lost. You thought I was a disappointment. I corrected. Because I didn't fit your mold. But I built something bigger than your legacy, and I did it without you. The truth hung in the air, raw and unyielding. David, sensing the drama, stepped back, his role as catalyst complete. Tomas, now at the bar, gave me a subtle thumbs up, his loyalty a quiet strength. The tent was a frozen tableau, my family grappling with the upended hierarchy. James's smirk was gone, replaced by a scowl. Claire's hands were clenched, her composure cracking. Dad's mind was racing, likely calculating how to leverage my success. Mom's tears were silent, her pride wounded. The crowd, family friends, distant relatives, watched with rapt attention, their whispers a low hum. I could have walked away then, left them to stew in their shock. But this wasn't just about the reveal. It was about setting new terms, rewriting the rules of our relationship. I'm not here to gloat, I said, my voice softening but firm. I came to see if anything had changed, if you could respect me for who I am, not what you wanted me to be. Tonight proved you can't. Not yet. Mom reached out, her voice trembling. Lena, please. We're family. Let's talk, understand each other. Her plea was genuine, but it came too late. Family doesn't exile someone for chasing their passion, I said. You cut me off, and I survived. Thrived. If you want a relationship now, it's on my terms. James stood, his voice tight. You think you're better than us because you got lucky with some app? Whitaker Enterprises has decades of history. You're a flash in the pan. His defiance was desperate, a last grasp at superiority. I smiled, unshaken. History's great, James, but the future's mine. ConnectSphere's reshaping how people work. What's your legacy doing for the world? The crowd gasped, the boldness of my challenge reverberating. Claire touched James's arm, urging him to sit, but her own eyes were stormy. Dad's voice cut through, low and measured. Lena, you've made your point. But this attitude, throwing your success in our faces, it's unbecoming. Unbecoming? I said, stepping forward. What's unbecoming is mocking someone you haven't seen in 5 years, assuming they're nothing because they didn't follow your path. I'm not throwing anything in your faces. I'm showing you what you refuse to see. The tent was silent, my words a mirror they couldn't escape. Tomas approached, carrying a tray of after-dinner drinks. Miss Whitaker, he said, loud enough for the table to hear, your team called. They need you for a board meeting prep. Shall I arrange a car? His timing was perfect, a deliberate nod to my authority. I nodded. Thank you, Tomas. I'll wrap up here first. The crowd's whispers grew, the reality of my status sinking in. Family friends now approached, offering congratulations, their tone a mix of awe and opportunism. Lena, I had no idea, said Mrs. Langley, a family friend. We must have you speak at our tech summit. I smiled politely, deflecting. This wasn't about their approval either. Mom stood, her voice breaking. Lena, don't leave like this. We need to talk as a family. Her desperation was raw, a crack in her polished facade. I looked at her, seeing not the intimidating figure of my childhood, but a woman grappling with her mistakes. We'll talk, I said, but not tonight. I have a company to run. I turned to leave, but James's voice stopped me. You think this changes everything? You're still the same Lena, playing at being a big shot. His words were a final jab, but they lacked power. I turned, meeting his gaze. And you're still the same James, thinking money is legacy. Good luck with that. The crowd parted as I walked toward the tent's exit, Tomas falling into step beside me. You nailed it, Miss Whitaker, he whispered. They didn't see it coming. I smiled, the weight of the night lifting slightly. Thanks, Tomas. I owe you one. He grinned. Just keep changing the world. As I stepped onto the lawn, the mansion loomed behind me, its grandeur no longer intimidating. I'd face my family, expose their flaws, and claim my truth. But the night wasn't over. There were bridges to mend or burn, and I had to decide which path to take. The Hamptons night was still, the fairy lights under the white tent now dimmed as the Whitaker family reunion wound down. The air carried a faint salt tang from the nearby ocean, a reminder of the world beyond this gilded bubble. I, Lena Whitaker, 32, stood just outside the tent, my navy blazer unbuttoned, my breath steady for the first time all evening. The revelation that I was the CEO of ConnectSphere, a $2 billion tech empire, had left my family reeling, their mockery silenced by the truth. James's smirk was gone, Claire's composure cracked, Mom's tears visible, Dad's pride shaken. The crowd, family friends, distant relatives, had dispersed, their whispers of awe and opportunism trailing behind them. I'd faced the lion's den and emerged not just unscathed but triumphant. But the night wasn't over. There were choices to make, wounds to address, and a future to define. Tomas, the waiter who'd been my quiet ally, approached with a glass of water. Miss Whitaker, you were incredible, he said, his voice low. They didn't know what hit them. I took the glass, smiling faintly. Thanks, Tomas. Your timing was perfect. He grinned, his eyes bright. Just doing my part. You need anything else before you head out? I shook my head. I'm good. Get some rest. You earned it. He nodded and slipped back to the catering crew, leaving me to face the aftermath. Mom was the first to approach, her silver dress catching the moonlight, her face etched with a mix of shock and regret. Lena, she said, her voice trembling, we need to talk. Please. Behind her, Dad, James, and Claire formed a hesitant cluster, their usual confidence replaced by uncertainty. The tent was nearly empty now, the jazz quartet packing up, the staff clearing the last of the crystal. This was the moment I'd both dreaded and anticipated, the reckoning after the reveal. I gestured to a nearby table, its linen still pristine. "Let's sit," I said, my tone neutral. They followed, their movements stiff, as if unsure of their place in this new dynamic. I took a seat, folding my hands, and waited. Mom spoke first, her eyes wet. "Lena, I had no idea what you'd achieved. Why didn't you tell us sooner?" Her question echoed the one she'd asked during my reveal, but now it carried a raw vulnerability. "Because you wouldn't have listened," I said, my voice steady but not unkind. 5 years ago, I told you I wanted to build something. You called it a phase, cut me off, and let me walk away with nothing. I didn't hide my success to hurt you. I hid it to protect myself, to build something that was mine." Mom flinched, her hand reaching for her pearls, a reflex of discomfort. Dad cleared his throat, his voice gruff. "We made a mistake, Lena. We thought you were misguided. But this," he gestured vaguely, as if encompassing my empire, "it's extraordinary. We're proud." His words were an olive branch, but they rang hollow, tied to my success rather than my journey. "Proud now," I said, meeting his gaze. "But you weren't proud when I chose tech over your path. You didn't support my passion, only its outcome. That's the difference." My words were firm, cutting through his attempt to rewrite history. James shifted, his face tight. "Come on, Lena. You can't hold a grudge forever. We didn't know you'd make it this big. Nobody could have predicted that. Nobody needed to predict it." I countered. "You should have believed in me, not my bank account. You mocked me tonight. James, call me a basement coder. Claire suggested I waitress. Mom and Dad offered me entry-level jobs like I was a failure. That's not family, it's judgment." The table fell silent, my truth a weight they couldn't deflect. Claire, her lawyer's poise faltering, leaned forward. "You're right," she said, her voice low. "I was cruel tonight and before. I thought you were lost, chasing something that wouldn't work. I am sorry." Her apology was tentative but genuine, a crack in her armor. I nodded, acknowledging it without absolving her. "Thank you," I said, "but apologies don't erase 5 years of silence." Mom's tears spilled over, her voice breaking. "What do you want from us, Lena? We're here now. We want to make this right." Her desperation was real, but it stirred mixed feelings, anger at their abandonment, but also a faint hope for something better. "I want respect," I said. "Not because I'm a CEO, but because I'm your daughter, your sister, who built something meaningful. If you can't give that, we have nothing to talk about." Dad's face softened, a rare vulnerability. "You're right," he said, surprising me. "We failed you. I failed you. I was so focused on the Whitaker name, I didn't see what you were building. I want to try, Lena, if you'll let us." His admission was monumental, a man who rarely admitted fault laying down his pride. I studied him, searching for sincerity, and found it in his tired eyes. James, still bristling, tried to pivot. "Look, Lena, your company's impressive, but it's young. Whitaker Enterprises has decades of stability. We could collaborate, merge resources." I cut him off, my voice sharp. "No, James, I don't need your resources. ConnectSphere stands alone, and so do I." His jaw tightened, but he didn't push. Claire touched his arm, a silent plea to stop. The conversation shifted, tentative and raw. Mom asked about ConnectSphere, her questions halting but curious. "How did you start it?" she asked. I gave a brief overview, coding in my dorm, launching with $8,000, the years of grit. Claire listened intently, her lawyer's mind cataloging details. 10 million users, she murmured. "That's incredible." Dad nodded, his respect growing. "You got my business sense," he said, a hint of pride. I smiled faintly. "I've got my own sense, Dad. But thanks." The moment was fragile, a bridge being built but not yet crossed. I wasn't ready to forgive, but I was open to trying, a shift I hadn't expected. "I'm free next weekend," I said. "There's a diner in Brooklyn I like. No galas, no legacy talk. Just us." Mom's face lit up, a small victory. "We'll be there," she promised. As they stood to leave, Claire lingered. "Lena, she said, her voice soft. "I'd like to see your office sometime. Understand what you do." Her request was a peace offering, a step toward connection. "Maybe," I said. "We'll see." She nodded, accepting the boundary, and joined the others. I watched them walk toward the mansion, their silhouettes smaller against its grandeur. The gates that had once closed me out now felt irrelevant. I'd built my own kingdom. 3 weeks later, I sat at my desk in ConnectSphere San Francisco headquarters, a glass-walled office overlooking the Bay Bridge. The morning sun glinted off the water, a stark contrast to the Hamptons' opulence. My desk was cluttered, laptop, coffee mug, a framed Forbes cover with my face. Priya, my COO, poked her head in. "Singapore deal signed," she said, grinning. "You crushed it." I laughed. "We crushed it. Drinks tonight?" She nodded, heading out. My phone buzzed. A text from Mom. "Looking forward to the diner tomorrow. Can we bring Emily?" I smiled, typing a quick sure. The Brooklyn brunch had been a small success, awkward but honest. Dad asked about my algorithms, stumbling over terms but trying. Claire shared a case she'd lost, a rare vulnerability. James was quieter, his ego still bruised, but he listened. Emily, my cousin, had been a buffer, her kindness a bridge. It wasn't a fairy tale reunion, but it was a start. The reunion had changed me, not because of their reactions, but because of what I'd realized. I'd spent years chasing validation, even after leaving them behind. But that night, standing at the podium, I'd seen my worth through my own eyes. ConnectSphere wasn't just a company. It was my voice, my legacy, built on passion and perseverance. Their approval, once my North Star, was now a footnote. I'd launched a new initiative since the reunion, a ConnectSphere program for young entrepreneurs, offering mentorship and seed funding. Every Saturday, I taught a cohort of 12 teens, their eyes bright with dreams like mine had been. One, a 15-year-old named Aisha, built an app for refugee job placement, her code raw but brilliant. Watching her debug a glitch, I saw myself at 10, coding in the attic. "You're going places," I told her, meaning it. Her grin was worth more than any Whitaker toast. My phone buzzed again, a message from Claire. "Read your Forbes interview. Proud of you." The words were simple, but they carried weight, a step toward the respect I demanded. I didn't reply, not yet, but I saved the text. Healing, I learned, was slow, built on small gestures, not grand gestures. The family I'd once craved was evolving, not into what I dreamed, but into something real, flawed, and possible. I opened my laptop, a draft of my TED Talk on the screen. The title, Building Your Own Legacy. I've been struggling to write it, the words too raw after the reunion. But now they flowed. 5 years ago, I was told my passion was worthless. I typed. Today, I lead a company that connects millions, not because I sought approval, but because I trusted my voice. Legacy isn't inherited, it's created one choice at a time. I paused, glancing at the bay, the city alive beyond the glass. The reunion had been a crucible, forcing me to confront my past and claim my future. I wasn't the poor relation or the family failure. I was Lena Whitaker, CEO, visionary, survivor. And that was enough. Have you ever had to redefine your worth in the face of doubt? Share your stories in the comments below. If this journey resonated, hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of resilience. Thank you for joining me. And remember, the greatest legacy is the one you build for yourself.